What if I told you that you could run your entire bookkeeping system out of Google Sheets? No expensive software, no complicated setup, just the power of spreadsheets. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Pri and I help to simplify accounting for everyday business users. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through how I pretty much rebuilt QuickBooks Online into Google Sheets, giving you complete control over your accounting and bookkeeping needs. In just one spreadsheet, you'll be able to manage everything from tracking your customers to tracking invoices and sales to viewing your financial statements, all with the click of a button. So if you're ready to get started, go ahead and spin up a new Google Sheet and let's go. Okay, so first up is the Settings tab. So this is where you'll input all of your crucial information, your fiscal year, tax rates, currency settings. Think of this as your command center. Set this up once and it'll power the rest of your spreadsheet. So the settings that I found to be the most important were currency. So I created a drop down for my various currencies. Your fiscal year start and end, which will become useful in other sheets as you'll see momentarily, and different tax rates. Depending on the state that you're operating in, you might have various tax rates that you're dealing with. You can go ahead and add other settings here, but these are the ones that I found to be the most critical for my business. Next is the Customers tab. Here you can track and manage all of your customer information. Whether you're adding a new customer, modifying an existing one, or deleting a customer, just go ahead and track and manage all that information here. It's as simple as filling out a form. Once you've created a new customer, you'll be able to see that customer show up in other parts of this spreadsheet, which I'll show to you momentarily. In order to set this up, what I did was just halfway down the page, I just created a couple of different columns, tracking key pieces of information that I felt were important to the customer. And then up top, I just created a couple of little pie charts that track a little bit of data related to each customer. So top customers by sales in terms of dollar value, and then top customers in terms of number of orders. So in order to set up these charts, just go ahead and select the data range that you want to create these charts for. Go ahead and click on Insert and then Chart, and then you'll be able to add these charts to any of these tabs. Next up is the Chart of Accounts tab. This is the backbone of your entire accounting system. This will help to categorize every financial transaction from assets and liabilities to income and expenses. So the list here is pretty standard to that of most financial statements. So you can, again, go ahead and download my spreadsheet, or you can just fill this in with accounts that are relevant to your business. But this would essentially help you to track and manage all of your various transactions coming in. And then this is going to help to form the financial statements later, like the balance sheet and the income statement. Now we've got the Inventory Management tab, basically your digital warehouse. You can add products, update quantities, and manage your stock in real time. If you ever need to know what's in stock or out of stock, it's all right here. Now you might be wondering, what if I don't track physical inventory? Well, this is still a great place to track your digital assets or your digital products that you are selling for which you don't track inventory for. The only difference is you wouldn't fill out any of the quantity information in this tab. So again, pretty straightforward. Just halfway down the spreadsheet, I've created columns for each of my various products and created columns for any specific information that I wanted to track on those products. Now, if we scroll over to the right a little bit, I've also built in a formula here. So for example, for any inventory purchases, this automatically calculates the inventory in using a sum if formula from the Inventory Purchases tab, which we haven't looked at yet, but we'll take a look shortly. And then quantity out uses a sum if formula, which deducts inventory from that particular product from the Sales and AR tab, which we also haven't looked at yet, but that's basically tracking any sales, so any inventory out of the business. Next up, we have the Sales tab. This is where all the magic happens. Input your sales transactions, create invoices, and track who owes you money. This replaces the Sales module in QuickBooks Online, and it is fully automated and tied to other tabs within this spreadsheet. So similar to the other tabs, just go ahead, like halfway down the spreadsheet, create columns for the various fields that you want to track for each sales transaction. For example, some sales are due on receipt, due right away, and others require an invoice, which is why I created a drop down for the terms, net 15, net 30, so on and so forth. And then if we scroll over, you can add other information related to the sale, like the description, the revenue category, which automatically pulls from the chart of accounts, the customer, which automatically pulls from the customers tab, and the product. Again, whether physical or digital, you should track your products or at least have a library of products somewhere so you can easily report on them after. So this allows you to track and manage your revenue category, your customer and product easily, which makes reporting a lot more easier as well. Other information that's worth noting here in the sales tab is the tax rate, which is pulled from the settings tab. And then I just created some simple formulas to multiply the quantity by the price, which gives you the revenue, times the tax rate, which gives you the total for that particular order. And then if this particular sale is on terms, then you can identify the amount of cash that's been received, and it'll auto-calculate the remaining balance for you, which then ties into the accounts receivable side of things. Just to take this one step further in terms of automation, if we scroll all the way to the right, this is also where quite a bit of the magic happens. Typically, when we think about tracking these individual sales transactions to our financial statements. So what I've done here is I've created a couple of different columns that represent the accounting impact for each transaction. So as a sale comes in, we know that there's an amount that's going to go to the revenue account, which is going to carry over to the profit and loss statement. We might have sales tax payable. We might have accounts receivable if this is an invoice that's on terms. If we're getting paid right away or we've been paid on any of those invoices, then we might have a cash impact. And then if we're physically selling goods, then there will be a cost of goods sold impact to the profit and loss statement. So if you have an accounting background, this would be good to set up yourself. Or if not, you can also get an accountant to help you do this. But once again, I've already created this spreadsheet and you're welcome to download mine in the link below. Now for your expenses, so money going out of the business, the bills and expenses tab is where you'll log all of those vendor payments, utility bills, or any other expenses that you incur. This will help you to keep everything organized and easy to track. So if we take a look at this tab, similar to the other ones, halfway down the spreadsheet, I've gone ahead and added the columns or the fields that were relevant to tracking expenses. The key one that I wanted to point out here is column E, expense category. So this is pulling from the chart of accounts tab or the accounts tab, which easily helps me to identify, or I should say categorize that particular transaction. And this is particularly helpful when we roll up into the profit and loss statement. But similar to the sales tab, I also have the tax rate identified here with a few easy formulas to calculate the total amount due. If those particular expenses or bills were due on terms or you're going to pay at a later date, you can identify how much you've paid now versus later. And then similar to the sales tab, pretty much just the opposite, money going out of the business, you're going to have a level of accounting impact. The expense, which is an account on the profit and loss statement, the tax expense account, possibly accounts payable if you're paying for this bill at a later time, or if you're paying right away or you've already paid for that bill, there will be a cash impact. But again, the benefit here of having the accounting impact is to make sure that our financial statements are being calculated correctly. Now, if you're buying inventory, you can enter those purchases here in the inventory purchases tab. This automatically syncs with the inventory management tab, so you'll always know what's coming in and out in terms of inventory. I decided to split this tab up from the bills and expenses tab, but it's completely up to you how you want to manage this. The main reason that I split this out was because I was tracking quantity and a bunch of other fields that might not be related or relevant, I should say, to some of the bills and expenses transactions. Now, once again, whether you're physically tracking inventory or not, I still think it's best practice to have a product catalog. You can ignore the quantity in and quantity out columns, but I think it's still important to track those purchases because then you'll easily be able to keep track of what you're selling and how much, and it'll then relay into the analytics tab, which we'll see a little bit later. But the key thing I want to highlight here in the inventory purchases tab, beyond just some of the standard fields here, is the product tab, and again, or product column, I should say. And once again, this is super helpful if you are tracking inventory. Even if you're not, I think it's worthwhile to understand how you're doing from a digital inventory standpoint. Now, the big call out here from an accounting standpoint, if we scroll over to the right-hand side, is we will see that there is an inventory impact, again, if you are tracking physical goods. So if it's related to inventory purchases, your inventory or your asset account will go up. So you can see that represented here. And then if there's a tax element, that'll be impacted here. And then whether you pay for that inventory purchase right away or not, it'll impact either or the accounts payable account, which is a liability account, or your cash account, which is an asset account. Or it might impact both if you're paying for some of those purchases up front. Okay, next, let's move on to the bank reconciliation tab. Reconciliations in general, but in the bank reconciliations tab, I've tried to create it and make it as simple as possible for you to basically copy and paste in your bank transactions and then reconcile them with the transactions that you've inputted in this spreadsheet. So let me show you how I've set this up. So if we scroll over to the right, basically what I've done here is I've created a filter formula that filters for all of the other tabs that brings in this example, cash out from inventory purchases, cash out from bills and expenses, and then cash in from sales and AR. And they're all using a filter formula. So as you input transactions into any of the other tabs, it will populate here, which pretty much represents all of the transactions that you've inputted as part of your business. Now, as for the reconciliation, this is where the second part comes in. This is where you would copy and paste in all of your bank transactions or bank statement line items. Whether you have multiple bank statements or not, you can just go ahead and enter them in here manually or copy and paste them in. And then you can kind of go through line item by line item saying what's reconciled and what's not. And then you'll be able to see your reconciliation summary up top with your bank balance, your cash account total, and the corresponding difference. Now, for the more advanced users, you've got the journal entries tab. So if you need to make adjustments or record non-standard transactions, this is where you'll enter them manually, just like QuickBooks has a journal entries section. So an example of a non-standard transaction that, maybe not automatically capture would be the amortization of some of your long-term assets. So you can go ahead and calculate that or input that into this particular journal entries tab. Or let's say there was something along the lines of like prepaid expenses or something you paid for in advance. You can go ahead and enter that here as well. And then a final example would be like the upfront capital or investment that an owner makes into the business. You can enter that here as well. So the columns that I've created here, again, pretty straightforward, just a reference number to the journal entry, date, description, amount. But the two very important columns here would be the debit account and the credit account. Now, this links back to the chart of accounts tab. So once you select the various categories, it will carry over to the chart of accounts tab and then, of course, subsequently carry over to the financial statements. Once again, I would only use this tab if you are tracking non-standard transactions like money in, money out transactions that you can enter into the sales tab or the bills and expenses tab or inventory purchases tab. If it falls outside of that category, use this journal entries tab, but also consult an accountant if you're not an accountant yourself or you don't have experience entering journal entries. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be out of balance. Speaking of being in balance, this now brings me to the trial balance tab. So what I've done here is I've basically brought over all of the accounts from the chart of accounts tab. And the trial balance is really a way for you to measure that your total debits equal your total credits. You want to make sure that after each transaction that you input, especially into the journal entries tab, that you come back here to the trial balance tab to make sure that the total debits and the total credits are balanced. You don't really have to worry about this when you're entering transactions into the sales tab or the bills tab or the inventory purchases tab, at least if you've downloaded my spreadsheet, because I've automatically synced this up. So it should balance each time. It's mainly when you enter manual entries into this journal entries tab. But essentially what this trial balance is, if you want to set this up yourself, is I've just pulled over all of the chart of accounts from the chart of accounts tab, and I basically summed up all the debits for that account and all the credits for that account. Again, using a sum if formula. The next tab I want to talk about is the tax summary tab, which gives you a clear view of your taxes paid and taxes owing. So very simply, what I've done here is I've created two different sections. One is the sales tax payable section, which is any sales tax that you've collected on sales made. So it basically brings over any transactions from the sales and AR tab along with the tax amount. If you remember the accounting impact side of things, it brings over that particular column. And this is using a filter formula. Then over to the right, I've created a taxes paid section, which is essentially tax expense, which auto-populates from the inventory purchases tab and the bills and expenses tab. So any taxes that you've paid on any of these purchases. So again, this is using a filters tab. And just to highlight where this is coming from again, if I go to bills and expenses, for example, this column here called tax expense, this is where I am bringing in that amount to these particular columns. And then what I've done at the very top here is I've basically totaled tax expense paid, so taxes going out or money going out, and then sales tax payable, which is sales tax collected, to give you an idea of the difference. Now, from a tax standpoint, this doesn't mean that this is all the taxes that you owe if you difference these out or you're expected to receive, but this gives you a rough idea of the amount collected and the amount paid so you can get an idea of the difference. Okay, now as for the financial statements, let's start off with the balance sheet tab. So the balance sheet tab basically generates a real-time view of your company's assets, liabilities, and equity. It's your company's financial health in one glance. I actually like to think about it as what you own and what you owe. So your assets versus your liabilities. So in order to set this up, pretty straightforward, you would just once again reference your chart of accounts. So you can see here, I'm just referencing the various accounts in this scenario, the assets. And then I basically sum up the difference between the debit and the credit from the trial balance tab. So you can see that I'm subtracting the debits from the credits. Now, there are some nuances here with some accounts that are in the reverse. So you'll just have to make sure that you're doing this correctly. But if you have done everything correctly here in terms of, subtracting debits from credits, you should see this balance sheet balance itself out. So total assets should equal the total liabilities and total equity. All right, now let's talk about the profit and loss tab. So here's the profit and loss tab. This is where you'll see exactly how much money you're making or losing over a given period of time, similar to how you see in QuickBooks Online. So similar to the balance sheet, you can go ahead and see on the left-hand side, I've referenced all of my various income and expense accounts from the chart of accounts tab. And then over here, I've included the total across each of those various categories. One thing I should point out here, which we haven't talked about really, is this date. So you can see this date reference here. This is actually referencing, if we go back to the very, very beginning, the settings tab, this particular date here. So your fiscal year date. Anytime you make a change to this, it's going to go ahead and update all of your various financial statement reports. And I didn't show you this earlier, but if we head over to the trial balance account or tab, I should say, if we click into one of these formulas, as I'm summarizing, let's say in this example, all of the cash transactions, I'm also making sure that those cash transactions, if you see the bottom of this formula, are contained within that date range from the settings tab. So it's incredibly important that you do this because you only want to be showing your financial statements over a specific period of time. And I've made it as simple as possible for you to enter the start and end date, so you're doing so accordingly. Now let's scroll all the way back to the beginning and go through the analytics tab. So what I've done here, and this is kind of similar to the report section in QuickBooks Online, but this will allow you to get deeper insights into your business. It'll essentially give you an overview of your performance, sales, expenses, profits, and it'll visualize this all in chart and graph form. So again, you can build this out the way you'd like, but in terms of what I've built in here, I've looked at my month over month performance. So I brought in my total revenue and my total expenses, again, using a sum if formula across your various tabs. So revenue from the sales tab, expenses from the bills and expenses tab, to determine my profit for that particular month. And then I've just headed over to the insert chart section to insert this particular chart at the very, very top. But this allows me to get a sense or a picture, high level, of my month over month performance. Now, if we scroll down to the bottom or middle section of this spreadsheet or this tab, you'll see I've got a section dedicated to the sales performance of my business. So top customers based on revenue earned from those customers. I can see a glimpse into any of my aging AR and invoices that are overdue. Then if I scroll down to the bottom, I'm seeing my highest profit margin products and my lowest profit margin products, along with my top selling products, all within this one tab. And this is all referencing those respective tabs. Now, if we scroll down to the bottom, we see a few analytics here related to expenditures. So my month over month expenditures, and then my expenses by category. So I can see where I'm spending my money the most. The final tab that I'll cover is the budget and goals tab. This is where you can track your budget against actuals and see how you're progressing towards your revenue goals. So very straightforward, similar to the overall performance tab, but this particular chart here is looking at budget versus expenditures. I've created a line item, or I should say a row, allowing you to enter your month over month budget, which you can update at any time. And then it's pulling over all of the expenses from the bills and expenses tab month over month, referencing that particular month. And this will give you a sense of whether you're within budget or over budget from a budget and expenditure standpoint. And then down at the bottom, if you have revenue targets for your business, you can go ahead and in this line item, enter your various revenue goals or targets, and then see how you're doing from a revenue standpoint, which pulls in similarly to the above, your sales and AR transactions, and then shows you whether you're meeting target, above target, or below target on a month over month basis. All right, so that just about wraps up this video. I hope you got some value out of this content. Go ahead and comment down below what topics you want me to cover next, and I'll see you in the next one.